The Namib Desert is the oldest desert in the world. True or false?
True.
In Namibia, business communication is predominantly formal, with a strong emphasis on authority and titles. True or false?
Absolutely true.
Namibia's official language is English, but there are more than 10 indigenous languages spoken. True or false?
True.
Hi, and welcome to ASHA Global Voices Podcast. My name is Tjasa Strle, and I'm a cross-cultural leadership coach and the creator of ASHA Global Voice. Together with my guests, we are sharing stories from around the world about different cultures, leadership, and human experiences that connect us. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button. Your support means the world to me. And now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to ASHA Global Voices Podcast. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Cerina Bezuidenhout from Namibia. As a Chief Operational Officer and co-founder of Future Females and a passionate advocate for system-driven growth, she believes in blending structure with creativity to help businesses and people thrive. She also believes that happy employees are your best employees and that compassion is the most important trait we need to have in this life. Welcome, Cerina. So happy to have you here.
Hi, Tjasa. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Me too. Let's go to the true and false statement. You said that Namib Desert is the oldest desert in the world. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Wow. Our Namib Desert is a lot what you would probably sometimes see with when you think about the Sahara Desert with the dunes, right? So a big part of that is that. And Namibia is on the west coast of Africa, and the Namib Desert runs next to the coastline. So you have these dunes, and like right next to it is the ocean. It's actually where I live because I actually live in the desert, yeah, and then it's on this coastal town. It stretches from a specific dune from the south to about where I am, and going north from here, it changes a little bit. The Namib Desert has one plant, the Welwitschia, which is actually, they call it like a dinosaur plant, and it's almost like the opposite of a palm tree. So the root is the root is like almost like the stem of the tree, but it goes that deep down, and then it has all of these leaves at the top, which is actually the opposite of the palm tree. But those plants get up to like 1,500 years. Some of them are like 20,000 years. Like they are so old. And so we've got an area where you can go and look for them specifically. But if you do find them randomly in the desert, that's also like a wonderful thing. Obviously, our animals have adapted to it, living in the desert. My husband actually used to work for 25 years with the desert elephants, where they kind of migrate between our semi-desert area, then walking through the desert to the ocean and then back again. To kind of like, so that's very interesting to kind of like get to know them. There's areas where the lions, and they call them the desert lions, are too. And then I think something else about the Namib Desert, which could be interesting, is like it's a very big source of diamonds. Like the De Beers diamonds, we have a very, very big division of De Beers in Namibia. And some of the biggest diamonds comes from Namibia, and some of the most diamonds. So that's an interesting fact, I think. But yeah, those three things, I think.
So interesting. It sounds like a lot is happening in the desert. The wildlife and the trees. I cannot imagine. I think I never saw such an old tree. It has to be something special, really. And the diamonds as well.
Yes, right? Yeah. And actually, where I stay now is an area which they call the moon landscape. And it's so funny when I've got a friend who lives in New York now, but she grew up here. And when she flew in the last time, she took like a video flying in, landing, and she took it, and she shared that on Instagram, and her friends were like, does your parents stay on the moon? And it actually is so true. This moon landscape area, which we've got, looks exactly like the moon. So yes, it is a very diverse area. And I think one of the things which we growing up in Namibia didn't always, I guess, you enough because you're just a kid and you don't value like nature and all of these things. Namibia is a semi-desert country. Like there's lots of areas that has very low rainfall. Namibia is also massive. Like the whole of the Western Europe fits into Namibia. So then you drive up and then there's different rainfalls. But even now, for me, when I go and drive specific routes in the desert from one town to the other, it's still beautiful. Like we would think, why would Europeans come here? It's so lush and green where you are, and it's like 52 degrees Celsius here and it's so dry. But I think as I grew up, I also appreciated that different nature and the beauty that you probably also see when you come visit these very vast areas opposite to what you are. Yeah.
For sure, it has its charm and it's different. And also, if I'm not mistaken, I think Namibia is one of the least populated countries in Africa. You maybe know
Yeah.
it is, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think we're just over 2 million at the moment. And so areas are very, like, not areas, but like towns are very, very far from each other. And we'll probably touch on that because that was one of my missions on starting Future Females, because this is where I grew up and in this area where there's so little development. But as you say, that's also part of the charm of this little town. It has its challenges because, a lot of people and a lot of area then isn't developed. So when people are looking for jobs or when kids get into like the employment phase, there's not a lot of options. So they go to these three little towns and it's completely overwhelmed and there's not enough jobs for like everyone. But yeah, it is one of the least populated countries, definitely.
And if we move to the second statement, which was in Namibia, business communication is predominantly formal with a strong emphasis on authority and titles. And you said that this one
Mm.
is true. Can you tell us a little
Mm.
bit more about it?
Yeah, I think what I will also say here is that Namibia has a very big informal sector too, right? So because we've got a lot of farms, and we don't have farms that's owned by foreigners. Now it's becoming more popular where we have other people, foreigners buying the game lodges, etc. But if I'm thinking now about the Western Cape, for example, where we have all of those wine farms, there's a lot of foreign owners. In Namibia, if I say we've got lots of farms, they're not really often owned. They're often owned by Namibians, right? And so that is a very big business sector, because it contributes to the economy. There's exports maybe of meat, or there's tourism, or it just serves the local economy. So there is this informal sector, but the formal sector is definitely very traditional. And I think two things I can say about that is Namibia was a German colony, right? So lots of German influence in that hierarchy, very important. But then also, if I think about, and here's maybe like a 50-50, because I'm thinking now about how people dress, and I'm thinking about the rest of Africa, and the rest of Africa, which is so influenced by almost, I want to say, like the English. But I know everyone wasn't owned, colonized by the English, but like suits, lots of suits, English formal hierarchy. So very European influence. However, there is like this Afrikaans tradition from our own country that comes and say like, look, it's like 36 degrees Celsius. You can't live really in suits. So then there's this informal sector of the more traditional person, I would say. And it would be an interesting one if you had to ask me if I say traditional, if that's a color and if that's a skin color and if that's just, I guess, a perspective. And so it's not a skin color. So it's not traditional in the skin color. If I say people dress more informally, it's probably more business wise, that I would say. Then it's more traditional, less formal, and
Hmm.
the clothing would be the same, if that makes sense to the
Yeah,
listener.
I think probably you were referring to different ethnicities as well that are in Namibia, right?
Yeah.
And the dressing is not, you don't wear just Afrikaans if your color of skin is black. If I understood correctly.
So what I actually, because I said it's the formal sector dresses a lot of
Like the
like,
corporate, the corporate.
uh, and and then I said the traditional now dresses more like informal, but I don't want to say traditional and refer to the ethnicities, right? So then it's not like the culture, say like the Bambu would dress like with their skins and stuff, because actually the Oshibambus, they dress very formal. So when I say traditional, it's more the traditional businesses, I would say, which would be a private sector, a smaller, a smaller business company or whatever. They would be more informal.
Okay. And you also lived quite some time in Germany, am I correct?
Yeah, I did, and I worked for a German company, no, for a Namibian German company here in Namibia when I started my career. So I had some exposure, I think, just to the mentality. But then I did a complete shift. I went into tech, into the startup, and then I moved to Germany where I kind of like also stayed into that sector. But I guess I do have a very deep appreciation and respect for the German culture, both from here, but also from my time.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have respect for every culture because we are different, but on the other hand, we can learn so much from each other, which is also
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And tell
Yeah.
me about the last statement, which is that Namibia's official language is English, but there are more than 10 indigenous languages spoken. You said that this one is true, and you already mentioned three ethnicities, I think. Afrikaans is one of the languages. And if you can just say a little bit more about it, and maybe which language do you speak also besides English?
So I am actually, my mother tongue is Afrikaans. So I'm Afrikaans and I speak English. I do not speak German, even though I spend time there also. But then German, we've got a big German community in our country. And then, yes, we've got a lot of like tribal or ethnic languages. I wouldn't say similar to South Africa, but I mean similar in like the quantities, right? So we've got Nama, which is a lot of people in the south, and they come from the sun, which is the Bushman, right? Then we've got Damara, also coming from the sun, but they're more in the north. We've got the Oshivambu, which is in the north, and the Hererus, which is a little bit of a mixture, but a beautiful culture in their own now. And they are, I don't know if anyone knows to maybe a little bit, but the Hererus are those women that wear like the really colorful dresses, and they've got a hat that's almost like, yeah, a triangle. So they're the Hererus, and we've got the Himbas, a tribe that lives very traditional still. They are those women who are mostly naked, but they cover themselves with that clay, that red clay, to protect them from the sun. And there's areas in Namibia where, yeah, where they really still live as if the rest of the world never happened in the last 2,000 years or 3,800 or whatever. And they're little eight tribe people, and they survive in the harshest environments, and they can't even speak your language because they've never even heard English. So it's beautiful. So yes, we've got a lot of different languages, but then to make it easy, Namibia decided just English. The business is run by that or through that. And I mean, you were exposed a little bit to South Africa, so you know that in South Africa, it's beautiful that they've got the 12 traditional languages. 12, I think, 9, I can't remember now. What makes it, and so they try to honor all of them in like different areas, but like not all of them are always on it, like on signs, or when you put out communication, even in a corporate, right? So if you have to put out communication to your employees, to communicate that in all 9 languages. So I guess that's often why companies also decide on a communication policy, right? To go like, okay, we are English. And
Yeah, I guess it makes so much sense because it's so much easier if you decide to go just with one language for the
yeah,
communication. Um,
yeah.
I'm also curious, you said that you speak Afrikaans. Can you maybe teach us how to greet in Afrikaans?
Okay, so hello would always be kind of like hello, right? So hello. And if you have to ask, how are you? You'll say, hoe gaan dit? And so something about the Afrikaans language is we've got the which the Dutch also has, right? So for the Dutch, this would be a little bit easier. I think that the Flemish and the people from Belgium might also have that. But hoe gaan dit? Want to give that a go? Yeah, that's
Hoe gaan
perfect.
dit?
That's perfect, Tjasa. And I would say, goed, dankie.
Dank. This actually
Yeah.
sounds a little bit like Dutch or somewhere
Yeah.
there.
Yes. Can you speak Dutch?
No.
Very, very similar. When we are, us and the Flemish, and I can't remember, when we are in the same areas and we speak slow, like they'll have to speak slow, we speak slow, then we can pick up each other's conversations. But often around a fire, then no one wants to speak that slow later, and you kind of like merge into English.
Interesting. And I know you already mentioned Namibia has a vast desert and also animal life and nature. And then coastlines, you mentioned that you live by the coast. But can you tell us a little bit more about the lifestyle there and how it might differ from other parts of Southern Africa? What comes to mind?
There's one thing that how I describe, I guess, my country and my people, and I say we live on the ground. And that's both physically and that's mentally or spiritually too, because yes, we love nature and we love to be in nature and actually to be on the ground. Like one of the most favorite things that all Namibians will do is like make a fire, and that is sit around the fire on the ground, or like sit on the ground around if you're on the beach, if you're camping. I mean, yes, if people listen to this now and then Namibians will like, they're like, Cerina, we've got camping chairs. And yes, we do have that too. But I mean, we do love nature. We love to be in touch with nature. And even if you don't like camping, you'll love lodges and love to go out into nature and you have friends with farms or whatever. And that's probably like the whole of Namibia. Even though there's different financial or like classes, everyone would love a fire and love nature and appreciates that. But on the other side, also, we are a country and a community and citizens that also, when I say we live on the ground emotionally and mentally, is we like we're like grateful for the small things in life. And with that, I'm not saying that there's not people that has big stars in their eyes and they run multi-million-dollar companies, or they that they don't see the rest of the world. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we have this appreciation for the simple things in life. And that's something that I really, as I've traveled also around the world, that I've really appreciated and respected about my culture. The fact that, hey, we love to sit around a fire, all of us, doesn't matter which culture, which ethnicity, which language you speak, we love that, love nature, love the benefit of, but also we love the small and appreciate the small things in life, which means that it's going to be family, it's going to be friends, it's going to be nature, which means that our own wellness really matters to us, our family matters to us. And those are for me, the basis of a good life. And from there on, good things sprouts. So that would probably be my biggest explanation of us and what I would like to leave with people.
I love that so much, Cerina. I want to join you by the fire, sitting on the ground and being grateful for a beautiful evening or just everything that is happening to us in life. And this is a great message also for the rest of the world. Thank you so much for sharing this. And would you add anything else to the characteristic that best describe Namibians? If there's anything to add, what would you say?
Ooh, else I'd really
That's okay.
describe. Yeah. I think there's something where you're going to ask me, and if I don't know if I will jump into this, but we did talk a little bit about the misunderstanding or misconceptions of Namibia,
I
which
would love to hear about it. Also,
yeah.
any stereotypes that you find that are just not true.
Yeah. You know what? One of the things I don't know, it's very strong in South Africa. So apartheid, right? And everyone kind of like knows about it. The sad thing for me, and I don't know if you kind of like agree with me because you've traveled so much. Apartheid has happened in all areas of the world. Like there has always been one community making another community work for them or put them down or whatever, right? But in South Africa, they just called it a name. So now in South Africa, and I love South Africa. I mean, I'm a citizen there too, and I've spent actually half of my life there. The thing with South Africa and this apartheid now is that there's a feeling of aggression, right? And what's really interesting is if you spend time there, that it's not always against the apartheid parties, actually, even. It's more with the tribes. Now, why I'm saying this is because Namibia and South Africa is very close to each other. We are like family. I mean, we also marry each other a lot, so we really are family. But we also were governed by them for a couple of years, right? So we are very close. And so I think a lot of people think then that the apartheid thing also happens in Namibia, etc., etc. But the misconception that lots of people have is that it's the same here as it is in Namibia. And I think then the other thing is that, so what I want to say is that there, there isn't that hatred or that aggression in the Namibian tribes as there is in the South African tribes. So that's one thing that I would love to share maybe. And maybe that does go into like the previous question. I once sat around a fire with a lot of like South African experts in history and like tribals. And they did explain it to me that the South African tribes are much more aggressive. So the Zulu and the Sotho, they fighting tribes, right? And they've got this fighting spirit, which the Namibians doesn't really have. So it is, I mean, it's interesting then if you do like the tribal research in the African tribes that you kind of like pick that up, right? These are like the warriors, and these are more like the herders or whatever. And so Namibia doesn't really have that aggression because we don't really have warrior tribes. But the other thing that really saddens me is that people come to Namibia, I mean, actually to South Africa too, but they come here and they judge the farmers for having workers from another skin color. And what they don't always understand, unless they spend maybe a month at that farm or in that area, in that community, is that there's not a hatred. There's not a you own me or like you don't treat me well. And maybe there is a little bit, but what it actually is, so we see it much more like I'm employed by, and I'm going to use examples. I'm employed by Althaven and List, which is a corporate in Namibia. So I'm spending some of my hours to work for them. They are going to make money out of the work that I deliver for them. They pay me for that. I get a cleaning lady in to work for me, to clean my house while I work for Althaven and List. And I have a gardener that helps me keep my garden good, but also we are now trying to get our own sustainable garden on. And so he's helping me with that. Because if I had to clean my own house and do my own garden, I wouldn't have been able to work. And if I did that, I wouldn't be able to pay them a salary. And the two of them goes back and like they put their kids through school. And so that's the one thing. And the second thing is that these communities of ours in Namibia, like my mom is a farmer. So they have probably like 3 families living on their farm. And I mean, Hachon just here with me, he has 2 daughters in school. And now I took in a new cleaning lady. And so what happens in Christmas time is like, you do kind of like, or other times too, you do take care of them extra because you do want them to have a good time too. So you would pay them a bonus, but you would also go like, buy them food for Christmas. You would buy them like for his daughter when she had her christening now, a dress and shoes for that. And you would, and so we do those things, but people from the outside has this judgment around apartheid and slavery, which isn't actually a thing. And unless tourists and visitors kind of like spend time really in the community or on a farm or whatever, and they have these real hard conversations, because lots of time also when you visit a country, you're kind of like scared to ask those very sensitive questions, right? You have to be brave to actually ask them, and open-minded to get the answer. So I think that's one thing that I would love for people to kind of like realize, kind of like know. So thank you for this opportunity to maybe also just put it out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. So what I'm hearing is that there exists like an ecosystem of, somebody working for somebody so that they can afford something or employ another person. And that at the end it works for
Yeah,
everybody. I hope.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it doesn't. I mean, Tjasa, if we're honest, we're all slaves still. We're all slaves to something, to a corporate, to a job, to a whatever, right? And and it depends, I guess, on us then as the interpreters to say how much of a slave are we, but we then have to admit that we are the slaves too. But it isn't that negative. So what people do a lot of the times when it's a skin problem, or not a skin problem, a skin difference, they make it this, I'm going to call it the apartheid problem, which isn't always the same. Yeah. So it is like you say, it's an ecosystem where it's almost like a give and a go, and it's understood and it's valued. It's not hated.
Okay, well, but I'm curious. I have to ask you, are the majority, and I'm not coming out from the judgment state. I'm just curious. So you mentioned that there are a lot of farmers that employ different skin workers. But I just would love to know, are the farm owners usually white, or what kind of skin color they have, and who are the workers?
Yeah, they were, Tjasa, if I'm honest, they were predominantly white. The government at a stage did an exercise where you could not sell your farm or even get it inherited without offering it to the government first. And what the government then did is they bought it at like a minimum, and they gave it to, black people. The problem with this then was that they give it to people who are not farmers. And so then that farm just falls apart, because it's also logical, right? Those people didn't grow up on these type of farms. Like they grew up in a little traditional community where you have four goats, and you slaughter one and you feed your people, or like in the north where you have like maize, and you have maybe 1 hectare of maize, even if it's that big, and you kind of like just that for your community. Where then they gave these people these farms, which has it's thousands of hectares, but also it has maintenance to do, right? So then you have water maintenance, you have electricity maintenance, you have building maintenance, and it's as if like they just dump them there and go like, okay, you've just got a farm which is worth 5 million, and like this is great. The gap that I see there, and this also comes from Future Females, because we ran a Future Females program. We ran 3 years in Namibia, focusing on women, and a lot of them, come from the agriculture background, and they want to grow that. And so as we get to know them, we get to know their sons and their whatever. And the problem then with that was that they don't have the knowledge to actually run a big farm like that, right? Or to understand the business aspect of that, right? And so for me, if I could consult and recommend to, I guess, to not only to government, but also to bodies who support this type of development, I would say, hey, let's teach youngsters how to farm, like really, really how to farm. Let's teach them the business aspect of them. Let's teach them maintenance, right? So many people nowadays judge maintenance. Like they judge the plumber, they judge the electrician, they judge the welder. We like go like, oh, that's not a proper job. Those are the things that keeps all of us going, right? Imagine one company without an electricity, like, or one massive corporate going without electricity. Yeah, they will say, oh, it goes through the generator. But the generator is also an electrician that helped you set that whole system up. And if the generator breaks, the electrician is the one that needs to be called out. So yes, it was predominantly white. No, there's a big mixture. As I said, currently where we are in January 2025, there's lots of foreigners buying game reserves and I'm going to call it hunting farms. So now there's quite a big mixture.
Okay, thank you for sure elaborating this, and it makes a lot of sense that always you have to educate people. If I would start owning a farm, somebody would have to educate me because I just don't have enough knowledge to run it at this stage. So in any case, education is extremely important. I totally agree with you. But I also would love to know, what would you say, what role does religion play in Namibia? What is the predominant religion?
Yeah, our predominant religion is Christianity. We have a very, very, very small community of Muslims, but it's mostly Christian. What role does it play? That's a really good question, because it's when you grow up in a community and it just is that, then you almost go like, it doesn't play a role because it just is. You don't even really sure about the role that it plays. There's no judgment towards it. So there's no discrimination if you're a Christian or not, or if you're a Muslim or what. So that's the one thing that I can say about it. We don't have like a requirement on that either, right? So you must be a Muslim to get this job, or you must be that. So that's also not there. But we definitely, I would say we're definitely a country that believes in God, believes in a higher power that we pray for and that we trust in all of the ethnicities or cultures, which I think then, and this is maybe just my assumption of our country, but I think that kind of like also sets the tone of like a general wellness, a general I wish you well, a general we have hope for the future, because we believe in this bigger thing. We forgive because that's what we ask God to do. I definitely also have friends who's not, and in business also. So it would be interesting actually to have them here right now and get their opinions, and sit around that fire and have that conversation of their opinions in Namibia and their experiences. But I mean, mostly I can just say that we are Christian. We are a practicing Christian community or country. And I honestly think that it has an influence on who we are and why we've got this calmer feeling in our country, because we do believe and we do wish and we do hope. I think that's also a big thing. We've got hope and trust in this bigger power.
Myself, I was not raised religiously, but then through life, I kind of started missing something, you know? So I developed my own religion, let's say, so that I also believe in a higher power. Sometimes I call it God, sometimes I call it universe, that I can maybe consult in challenging times, or that also brings me hope, as you said, which I think I do believe that we are spiritual beings as well. And myself being raised in not a religious environment, especially in my family, of course, in Slovenia, people are also religious. I felt I was missing something, something that is maybe not so rational, because this was the rational world, which I'm very good at, but something was missing. So I do see definitely good aspects of religion. And of course, the institutional wise, I see also negative aspects throughout history. But I would agree with you that it brings you something good if you take it as that. Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me, Cerina, how would you say is work-life balance valued in Namibian culture?
I say it's good because I just said we have this love for nature. But I mean, I'm going to be honest and say that,
Yeah.
they are the same as all countries. There's cities with corporates and people work lots of hours, and there's people I don't want to say that they're motivated and the others are not motivated, but people who really work hard and really work terrible hours, I guess I should call them that. I've met people that struggle with burnout here due to work, due to family responsibilities. So it's definitely happening. COVID was a big thing also here, where that blur came, of like, but now the job is inside my house and I don't switch off. And that kind of like went on. I think so many people still struggle with that, right? That influences then family life, relationships, kids, So I I honestly don't know, Tjasa, because I don't know how it's the rest of the world either, if we're really honest. I would want to hope that there's like these countries which I now imagine, and I go like, oh, I hope that they clock off at 5 o'clock every day and they go have a cocktail, or like they go. I mean, I met someone from Switzerland the other day, and she said, "Oh yeah, she goes and ski before work every day." And I'm like, "That is great." So I wish that for everyone. But I honestly don't really know. I know that people take care to go camp. They take care, but it's such a mind decision, right? To go like, okay, my family's important to me, so I must locked down at a certain stage. It's important that I exercise because that not only influences my longevity, it also influences my mind, my mood, those kind of things. So I would probably say it's okay, but I know that there's people that's working very, very hard and that burnout is still a real thing, which then indicates the other.
Fair enough, Cerina. Which is a bit generalization as well. As you mentioned, there are people that work extremely hard and long hours, and people that also pay attention to other parts of their lives, such as family or well-being or recreation. But I like to ask this question as well. Just the other day, had a conversation with Beck. I think Beck Davis, you remember her from Australia, and she lives on the Gold Coast. And so I was speaking with Beck Davis. She's from Australia and she's living on the Gold Coast. And she said that their work-life balance is really, really appreciated. So that people sometimes start later on in the day because they want to go surfing in the morning, or they finish earlier, or they adapt kind of the working hours as well to enjoying the beach life and being outdoors. And she really said that this is it's really important to them. So this was interesting. And then, for example, English people, just the other day I was speaking with Mike, who is English, but now lives in Spain. And he said that, Spanish people really do enjoy and take the time during summer, to really properly kind of chill and relax and not focus on work that much. Also in corporate, on the other hand, English is like business as usual. But, also the weather there they don't really
Yeah.
have a proper summer. I guess also the weather influences and, where you live. Is it by the sea, in the nature, really in the city? I think all of that also influences us, in different areas of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the examples that you shared because I think Namibia does lean towards those two, like Australians in Spain, more because they are very aware. And, we just had December holidays. So for like these 2 weeks over from Christmas, just before Christmas to after New Year, I think there's a lot of companies that just close, right? And or they have like skeleton staff. But there's this feeling, kind of like the same. So it's not as long as the European summer, that August and September, but where they are consciously kind of like closing down and say, this is family time. I think Christianity helps here then too, right? It influences that. It's family time. We get together. So but there's definitely farmers that comes for a little bit longer, right? And because now I live at the coast and everyone kind of like floods here from the inland, from the warm areas to here. So there's definitely this thing. And then also one thing that Namibians do quite often, they do go camping or they do explore nature quite a bit, quite often, like do things over the weekend. And if I'm thinking now about men mostly, but Namibia is a hunting culture, right? And I mean, we do have trophy hunting for overseas, but also it's a country that, because we're farmers, right? And so to feed our own families, we go hunting for springbok or gensbok or whatever. And so lots of men, we kind of like in wintertime it's hunting season. So they would maybe a bunch of them would go for a week and they would go and hunt for the meat supplies for their family for the year, right? And so things like that for me is work-life balance, right? To say like, okay, I've got a December holiday of 2 weeks, but also I'm taking a week or a long weekend or whatever somewhere in winter where I'm also having fun. I'm with my mates. I'm almost like, what is it when the old people went to like hunter gatherer almost a little bit. So it's not hunter gatherer, but I mean, they do go and get like meat supplies for their family. But so I do think that is also like a little bit of a work life balance. And I'm very sure when they do work, then work very hard and stuff, But I think the awareness is there to have a more balanced life. And I think also because family is so important in our culture, our work-life balance in our culture is maybe better than some other countries.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love to hear that, but because I think it's so important that we don't focus just on work. Life is, as you mentioned also before, we are kind of slaves in a way, all of us a little bit to work, to money.
Yeah,
So it's other areas are definitely important.
yeah. And to enjoy
And
life because there's so much
to
given.
enjoy life and nature
Yeah.
and to be grateful, as
Painter.
you mentioned at the beginning. Tell me, Cerina, what would be your advice to someone starting to work with Namibians? Are there any specific communication styles or cultural nuances that maybe we should be aware of to make a good first impression, let's say? If you can also compare it, for example, to your experiences in Europe. I'm sure you noticed some differences there.
Yeah. So actually, if I would be speaking to someone who's going to enter the corporate space, it would probably be the same as in Germany. I'm doing a presentation now, or I contacted someone yesterday about a possible product, which got me by surprise a little bit. And I wanted to just get her advice. She's in a corporate. And she's like, okay, this person who would be heading this up is still on leave. She'll be back in this. And she said, but why don't you put a presentation together? And if you can send us a pre-read, right? So that already sets the tone, right? So if you want to kind of like get to work with a corporate, do like the traditional stuff. Get your presentation right, your information, have a little bit of a pre-read. I think LinkedIn is strong in Namibia on the formal sectors side. People read that quite a bit and they follow that quite a bit. I think, like most of the world, it's good to have contacts, right? Yeah. So if you can kind of like maneuver that, and then I think that formal and informal sector is quite a big thing in Namibia. And I don't know if it's that big a thing in other countries. For me, it definitely is. I see the difference, right? And to be very honest with you, Tjasa, I don't move in the circles where the mine executives move in, right? I don't move in this circle. The mining is now a big industry. So I sat at a coffee shop, and it wasn't, yeah, it's kind of like a coffee shop, but it was always like the entrance to a hotel also the other day. And I just kind of like heard the conversation next. I can't even remember what it was. I just kind of like overheard it. Can you hear me?
I just
Okay.
had a question. Mining industry of what
Mining
diamonds or
industry.
what did you
Well,
have?
we do mine a lot here. We've got uranium, we've got lithium. So and so I heard just like this one thing, and like when you sit and you hear something, you go like, what? Is that actually happening in my small little country? And so that's the conversation. So I think I'm not even exposed to some of the real big things that happens here. So if someone had wanted to enter Namibia and they're in that sector, I won't even be able to like advise them or whatever because I don't even know how formal and how closed is that sector actually. So if you'd want to enter that, who would you need to speak with or stuff? So I think that's one thing. So I think this private and corporate sector is quite a thing that you'll have to research a little bit when you do that, when you do enter. Um, the informal sector is very often run by the Afrikaans.
Can I just ask one question? By informal, you are referring to farmers and small company owners or
Yes,
private
yes.
company owners. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if that is the right definition, but I mean now in this podcast, in this conversations, this is the best way that I could say it. Yeah. So it would be like a normal person like me starting a business, it would be private, but this business could actually become a multi-million dollar company. I would just not, handle it as much as a corporate. So that's the private sector. And the private sector is often owned by the Afrikaans white people in Namibia. That's probably a generalization, but it is probably closest to the truth. And for us, honesty and directness is very important. Okay, so it's just like be honest, be direct. Let's not waste each other's time. Like, what do you want to do? Have a conversation and then go on, right? So if someone wants to enter the country like that, that would be my tip to them. Get to a person, but also you don't have to be like polite and beat around the bush and stuff. Be polite, but this is what you want. How, and that's it. Um, yes, that would be my.
Okay, to be honest, to ask for what you would like and not don't beat around the bush,
Yeah.
but still be polite.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even like the north there's a lot of like the north as a very big Oshibambu. I'm gonna call them now Oshibambus. They have more sub tribes under them. But even for those informal sector business owners, then which would then not be the Afrikaans tradition, Afrikaans white man, it would be the Oshibambu person. They would also appreciate, be honest, be straightforward, don't waste my time. Let's decide, can we do it or not do it? I think. Maybe I'm also naive. Maybe there are more nuances, but I think that's the thing. Yeah.
No, it makes total sense. This is something that it comes from your experiences working with Namibians and you being a Namibian yourself. But
Yes.
as always, there are different characters of people. It's not always 100% sure, but maybe just a broader idea to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
tell me, what qualities make a respected leader in Namibia? What would you say if you have an answer to that one? What
I think
people
the biggest
value
of
in a leader?
I think the biggest one throughout would be respect for everyone. Because again, the fact that we've got so many cultures is still a thing, right? So if a leader can be respectful towards every person, knowing that this person has a different background and whatever, which is the same everywhere, actually, right? But respect is really respect. And I think the other one that I really appreciate and that I see is that you matter, which is always a challenge. And I mean, you probably have lots of experience with that too. But in corporates with lots of employees, how do you not become just a number or fall under the general worker or the engineering team or the, debitors and creditors? But I respect you, I listen to you, so I respect you and you matter. So whatever you have to say, and maybe I don't have an answer or I can't give you the solution that you want, but at least I listened to you. If I'm thinking now about my years in corporate in Namibia, they have these big, they had it in Germany too, these big, I call it hall sessions, where they get lots. And I mean, I'm from the manufacturing industry. And then, yeah, let's just leave it there. But so they have these hall sessions where they kind of like have like a whole factory come in, or like they have a whole, and then they have the communication to, this is what's going to change now. How are you feeling? And so respect and that you matter is a very big thing. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. If I can say, you were my boss, Cerina, and I felt so respected by you. And also I felt that I mattered and the whole team that you, and then just the energy and the culture that you created within your team. I think it was beautiful. And it was similar to what you just said just now, with respect to, differences and different people and trying to value them as well.
Thank you. I guess I'm also glad that I lived in that you felt that.
And now that we already maybe started to talk a little bit about Future Females, can you tell for our listeners what's the mission of Future Females and why it's so important to you?
Yeah. So Future Females is the online community and education platform for aspiring, so for new women who wants to start a business, but also for women who have a business and want to scale it or are looking for community. And we started initially, actually, this goes back to so Lauren and I started it together. Lauren had just moved from Australia to South Africa. She didn't want to go into like the formal workspace, so she wanted to start her own business. I had just finished my MBA in the lean startup principles. I didn't want to go back into my old sector. And so we were both very, very interested in the startup space. We needed mentors and coaches. We looked for a community of women to talk with and to lean on and to work with. And also for me, like Lauren was and is still a serial entrepreneur. So she kind of like knows business and how to start it and lots of tech. Me, I came from the food industry, which is completely different to a technology business. And so I definitely looked for mentors and workshops and resources too. And so we said to each other, well, if there's people like us, there's probably more women out there looking for this kind of thing. And that's why Future Females were born. And community was a very big thing for us, hosting offline events, getting women together so that they get to know each other in that town or city or area, and then get access to expert mentors in that space, etc. COVID definitely influenced us there when we had to go online. I think, and you were there too, right? Because we were running online and remote work already, we were probably one of the companies that did this switch the quickest and the easiest, right? But it did, as we all know, the Zoom fatigue kicked in at a stage, and all of these online events and things definitely affected everyone. So we don't have the offline community anymore. We also now a platform. So we've got the online platform with programs that we launch, and that community is quite strong and quite beautiful. And then we also work with governments to if to kind of like host programs supporting them in their annual targets. So for example, if they would want to support 3,000 women this year to educate them on finances or to educate them on business starting or like whatever. Or they would say, we want to be focused more on the circular economy or green tech or agri tech. So we want programs in that. So then we work with them, design these programs and execute them. And going back to Lauren and I, why we started. So Lauren, coming from Australia, her idea was, to work on a laptop and have that cocktail, like the true Bali style. But that's also what she wanted women to be able to do, right? She wanted to facilitate. If women want to have that lifestyle, let me help you have that. Right? Me coming from Namibia and this big area with not lots of people, not a lot of development, but then a lot of women actually just being married to husbands on a farm and not always, or rather, let me say, being financially dependent on them because, she's on the farm. She can't have her own job or like whatever. And to support them in like, what can they do to make their own money from that, right? And so that's why the online education was important for both of us because we wanted to have that reach. And for me specifically in Namibia, you can't have a workshop in each town. You're like 300 kilometers from the closest town. So then the online was the easiest. And so that was a big thing for me on the online education. And then the community to give them this online exposure to other women that's going through the same thing or a similar thing, and they can lean on them, right? So that's Future Females in a nutshell. Maybe you've got more specific questions.
Beautiful community, Cerina, and it's so nice to hear as well that you are not just empowering female entrepreneurs or inspiring entrepreneurs or somebody who wants to scale their business, but also women who are not yet financially independent, kind of giving them the tools to earn their financial independence. I think this is so, so important for us women in general, so that we can be more independent and have also, because to be honest, with money also comes voice, right? And you can make better decisions for yourself if you can afford to live on your own, or kind of sustain yourself. I think this is extremely important.
Definitely. I think I just want to add this quickly here.
Of
One
course.
of the things that I really appreciated about Future Females was the fact that Lauren and I also grew up with Future Females, and so many, almost like either how our community matured or as we matured. But the company and our community matured the same way as she and I also did, and I think even if we look at financial stability, and that's all education, because at a stage we were like, hey, how are we handling our own money, and how can we, and how should we, and that's how lots of things for Future Females, I guess, kind of like evolved too, because we're like, hey, Are you guys also, or you ladies also like wondering how to handle your money, where to invest, what are the options? And like, okay, let's get someone in because we are also looking into this for ourselves. I think that was also really fun and nice. And I wish that kind of maturity for a lot of founders because it was really nice to see kind of like our community and our business kind of like maturing the same needs that we so it was very organic, which was lovely. Yeah,
Everybody learning and growing. That's amazing to hear. And I think it's
exactly.
extremely important, especially being a founder, you have to kind of progress and grow if you want your business to evolve as well.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
guess it's important for everybody, but especially for business owners. I'm curious, Cerina, tell me, what would you say, what's one most memorable leadership insight you gained during the years? What comes to mind?
You know what, Yaja? I always thought that I'm a people's person. And so when Lauren and I kind of like decided on roles and responsibilities, like I kind of like gravitated towards like team management and but I must admit, and I mean you and I work together, it was it challenged me more than I thought I'm good at it. It really challenged me. And what I realized then, but even now, is that I'm not such a good communicator. So that's probably like my biggest learning and leadership and like business. Because I was like, gosh, I thought I'm a good manager or a good leader or a good people's person. And then I would see that my team is struggling, or I would see that I'm not giving feedback to my, the person that's reporting into me, maybe like in responsiveness or like in time or guiding correctly. And I was like, wow. I think for me there also, I realized that that whole thing about learning is never really over. Because we would think, hey, we went through a leadership course, or like we think we've got these things covered. And then you get into practice and these balls drop. And I also, if I may admit this to myself and on this live, is like I I'm ashamed at some of the things that I maybe didn't do, and some of the things how I didn't support my team in like times when they needed it. So that was a big one for me, thinking that I was good at something and realizing that, hey, you definitely still have areas of growth and improvement that you could do.
But I think, Serena, this is big of you also that you have the level of awareness to see where you could, where there is room for improvement, because it's not just about you with all of us. We always, do mistakes, learn as we go, get better. But I think that the awareness makes us, even capable of also admitting when, ego might hurt a little bit, but this is the prerequisite for growth. And if I can say also, when I work closely with you at the end, I really kind of enjoyed the thing that you mentioned before, which was the respect and kind of the equality I kind of felt, But on the other hand, at least in my opinion, you were also giving clear deadlines and kind of instructions for what you needed as well, which I think it was great, at least for me, because I think deadlines are so important. But on the other hand, let's make it work and, kind of respect each other and have this nice communication. Please, this was my point of view. So I guess you did something well. Don't be too harsh on yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And Serena, as we are approaching the end of this podcast, I would love to ask you one final question, which is a bit a broad one, but just say what comes to mind. If you could imagine a better world to live in, what would that look like for people globally?
If I could ask everyone in this world to have compassion for the next one, I think that would be it. Because compassion is just like, it's the no judgment. It's the, hey, you're going through something. Maybe that's great. You're going through a great thing, or you're going through a hard thing. But to have compassion, and as soon as we've got compassion, we won't do bad things to each other. because we will just have the compassion that, hey, this person is living their life and doing their best. Probably a very short answer because that's all that I wish. People will just have more compassion for each other. I could elaborate in like more things, but that's it. So if I can just, everyone can just have a little bit more compassion for everyone around themselves, I think it could be a better place.
It's a beautiful wish. I agree with you. Compassion is so important. And if the whole world would have it, definitely things would look more positive, to say the least. Thank you so much, Cerina, for taking the time for all your insights about Namibia, about leadership, about future females. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. It really was nice, Tjasa. It was so, so nice to spend this time with you. Thank you so much and good luck with all the rest.
Good luck to you as well.